welcome in. Hello, Saints fans. Got a little bit to talk about today because right now we're in the point of the whole process of trying to find a head coach, and things likely heating up a little bit, according to Albert Breer, um, reporting day before yesterday. They're kind of stacking some of the offensive guys are now on the board apparently, and kind of stacking up some interviews this weekend. I haven't got confirmed if what he initially reported on Friday and Saturday is correct, but I don't have any reason to disbelieve him. But Joe Brady, Kellen Moore, Kliff Kingsbury's coming in. Mike McCarthy's contract wasn't renewed, like everybody pretty much knew wasn't going to happen, that they weren't going to reach an agreement. And a lot of feeling that he's going to jump in this fairly soon. And I kind of think he will, but still nothing official about being offered an interview by the Saints. Real quick before we go into um, kind of the what to expect as this process goes on somewhat, or speculate's probably a better word. The other day, I think it was Betline posted their odds. I happened to see them for the next Saints head coach, or updated. I think they've been up for a while, but I don't think they'd been updated until recently. And they pretty much had Aaron Glenn at negative 200, which is basically 1-2. Joe Brady 2-1, Kellen Moore and Kliff Kingsbury, or Kellen Moore 6-1, Kliff Kingsbury, Mike McCarthy 7-1. Even though, again, far as we know, there hasn't been an official interview set up with Mike McCarthy. Expectations that's going to happen. And when I saw that, it's really the two questions that I have up on the screen kind of popped into my head and was like, are you basing this on who do the Saints want as a head coach, or who really wants to be the Saints head coach, or some combination thereof? And I get they're not making a prediction. They're setting a betting line, which is similar, but not quite the same thing, right? They're just trying to get some money bet is what it boils down to. The accuracy of which one it is matters to them in the aspect of the right one gets picked. And everybody else has bets everywhere else, then they make more money. But as far as the organization and more importantly, Saints fans, as we are, it's kind of like, well, yeah, the right fit does matter. And that's really, do I want to be here? And do you really want me to be here? When they say fit, that's ultimately what it comes down to. And I kind of agree that Aaron Glenn, I still think, is a front runner and in a topic of conversation over the last 24 hours. I think out of the ones up there, he makes the most sense right now. Once the interview process begins with the guys that they haven't talked to yet, Brady, Moore, etc., maybe you shift a little bit, but on the face of it, Glenn makes a whole lot of sense. He really does. And in the last 24 hours, and basically since today, that's kind of in some circles been debunked, that it was leaked supposedly that Aaron Glenn told the Jets that, hey, if you offer me the job, you're my first choice. Like I said, there's been some people going, not so fast on whether how or in the accuracy, let me put it that way, on the possible accuracy of that statement that was thrown out there. But I can get it in the instance of, I do think the Jets are a better fit for Aaron Glenn than the Saints from the outside looking in. And I no idea what he's thinking about. But for all intents and purposes, I think the Saints and Jets right now are a very similar organization. Ownership hires people and kind of gets out of their ways, almost to the point in both organizations. It feels like you almost have an absentee owner once the decision is made. And then when things start going off the rails, then they kind of come back in and get involved. And you might want to get involved before it goes off the rails to try to keep it from going off the rails. But I think both ownerships are kind of fall in that category. Lots of issues and problems over the years in the GM and the front office, in the sense of, look at your rosters and how you kind of go through these downtimes, and some of the free agents you brought in, some of the mistakes you made in the drafts, and trying to work out of it. I think offenses are very similar because both teams, despite some missteps in the draft, on the offensive side, they do draft some exciting young players. Wilson and Hall come to mind immediately for the Jets. I know they've drafted a little bit on their offensive line that possibly seems to be starting to work out for them. Saints, kind of the same thing. Our two wide receivers, Kingsbury, Miller. Part of the problem is I'm talking about these young, and obviously we drafted Fuaga to try to help out our offensive line, and that one may work out. When you talk about the skill positions outside of Garrett Wilson for the Jets, a lot of their young guys are just like our young guys, the three I mentioned. It's like injury issues have like just crept up on them, and you're going, I don't know how stable that is or how long we're going to have them, or if it's worth the conversation in the future of the organization. And in both cases, you're going to find out over the probably next season for them to see if they're still in the plans or if you're going, we may have to move on. So you kind of check in a lot of the same stuff in both organizations. I feel like, and then you get to the defense, and as a defensive guy, this is where I'm from the outside looking in, speculating. He's got to be looking at that defense the Jets have compared to the one we're going to try to put out there. And if it's the same one, we're going to still try to put out there that we've had the last couple of years. He's got some young, exciting players. Will McDonald on the edge, Quentin Williams and Kinlaw on the interior. Jamin Sherwood, who just kind of showed up this year, filling in for CJ Mosley, was pretty good. Quincy Williams, both of those guys are linebackers. Obviously, Sauce Gardner, they're a former first-round pick on the outside who did get injured this year. And so he may fall into the category of watch the injury issues. Is that going to be a concern? But some talent they've amassed there that is pretty much on a rookie deal, on a second-year contract, not tons of money invested in them as a group. I'm trying to think. I looked it up and I didn't write it down. Shame on me. But the oldest one of the group, I think it's Kinlaw, who's like 27, going to be, I think, 28 during the season. So you don't have a lot of age there. But you've got a decent nucleus you can kind of build around and mold. And I think like they had a defensive guy in Robert Sala until he got fired after all that kerfluffle happened in the middle of the season. But it seemed like he kind of had that defense going in the right way. It's like it's a couple of paces ahead of where we need to be. And I'm just wondering if somebody looking at it isn't throwing that out there going, somebody trying to say, yeah, we've got the inside scoop. Glenn's going to the Jets. Did that really come from him? I don't know. Did it come from an agent trying to make more money, trying to get in a little bidding war between the two teams that are possibly hot for him? So I don't really know how that plays out, but I feel like if you're going to talk about him, even if it's true, and I'm not saying it is, and I'm not convinced it is, that the Jets are his first choice over the Saints. Outside of that, outside of any organization, I do think he's the fit of, do we want him as a head coach? And does he want to be our head coach? And I think the other thing I should have brought up is talking about he played for the Jets, he coached for the Saints. He's been in both cities. He knows what he's getting into in both organizations, fan bases, communities, everything. And I really believe he would fit in both of them, which way it ends up going, who offers him the job and which one he accepts. So kind of looking at it through that scope, I can see why he's the favorite. I kind of understand why he's the favorite. Good chance he will be our next head coach. But I can also kind of see where that Jets rumor, let's just call it that, since we don't know if it's confirmed or not, kind of propped up. And a couple of reasons of why. I got to jump from the list ahead of the way the odds makers are, because in a weird sort of way, I think Mike McCarthy fits both those questions. There's been a lot of talk about him lately. a lot of Saints fans and some media kind of getting behind McCarthy as some first choice, some as a second choice if the Glenn thing doesn't work out. Um, but looking at those two questions, I think the Saints would embrace McCarthy and want him as a head coach. And I think if you kind of look back what happened in Dallas during the season, there was already I wish I could give you the week when we first started hearing this, but I know it was later in the season, but I think Dallas was still technically in the playoff race. So I don't think it was at the end of the season. That bubbling up of questions of Jerry Jones, are you going to fire Mike McCarthy? That was the thing. A lot of people thought he was going to get canned before the season ended. It didn't happen. And nobody was sure if Jones was really, because everybody knew his contract was running out in January. Does Jones really, is that your typical owner? Um, just saying it because it's in season and he is planning on moving on. The old kiss of death. No, we support our head coach no matter what. And he's not there. It's in about 2 months. Or was he sincere? Did he really want to bring McCarthy back and was trying hard? And McCarthy was trying to just basically, I'm done in Dallas and I want to move on. Seems to be some feeling it was the latter. Jerry Jones really wanted to bring him back. And it as far as McCarthy was concerned, it just wasn't happening. But I do know by the time all this started to happen, there were 3 jobs available, ours, the Jets, and Chicago. And I feel like maybe McCarthy at that point had zeroed in on at least one, if not multiple of those jobs. And I think New Orleans, in a weird sort of way, much like they mirror Dallas in a weird sort of way, as much as they mirrored the Jets, just in different areas. And I think offensively, the Saints have some young players to get excited about. Dallas, CD Lamb, but you know, both teams kind of that veteran quarterback's getting paid a lot of money. What are we going to do with? But he seemed to be able to deal with that situation in Dallas. And if Carr ends up, they bring Carr back, he might be the coach that, okay, let's see what we can get out of him. Again, the similar feel. I think the biggest and mega difference is Jerry Jones is the anti-Jet slash Saints owner in hire someone, meddles, wants to call all the shots, it's like just pull the string and the people that work for him are supposed to go, yes, Jerry, yes, Jerry. I've used that joke a lot, but it seems to be true. And he could very well just be looking at it. I can't work for this guy anymore. I need to get out. Logically, he's been in the Saints building. There is some familiarity there. So he's been in the city. Granted, it was a long time ago, but I, I think again the answer to both those questions are a yes and yes, and he could be a possibility. We'll say this too. I think the Bears ownership, as far as I know, is also kind of in that we're not meddlesome a la Jerry Jones type thing. And I think the Jaguars also, but the problem with the Jaguars is they have a GM that'll do it for the owner, and Trent Baalke, he retained his job. So I think a lot of these veteran type coaches, there's a couple floating around, but none of them are really high on the Saints list. And I don't expect them to be, but they would be the ones that stability and no meddlesome ownership. And let me try to work with the front office. That's sad to say. That's kind of the most attractive thing the Saints probably do have going for them. And of those guys, if they can get some leeway in the front office about roster talent, roster control, make you say, hey, that's what we're supposed to do. They're supposed to tell us, and the scouts are supposed to go find them and get them and bring them in. My feeling on that. But if that's ever going to work again, then yeah, you start looking at the guys who've been around the league a few years as opposed to the younger guys, and you're kind of wondering, those guys are going to want to, I think, for lack of a better phrase, they have the system and they're hoping the front office is going to get the guys to fit their system. A lot of these younger guys, that's where I can see where they may not want the Saints job and the Saints may not want them. But a lot of these younger guys, actually, I think there's two categories. There's one that is the whatever you give us, we'll figure it out group. So I think those are the ones the Saints might be looking at. But and when I say younger guys, first time coaches also consider them youngsters. There's those guys, and then there's the guys that want to be system guys, but can they identify what actually is their system and communicate it? Because a veteran guy like Mike McCarthy, if assuming that is, he can. So there's that. So when you start looking at the other three, um, I don't know the feeling, the vibe. Are they fits? Do we really want to be here? And do the Saints really want to hire one of those guys? Are they hoping it's going to be Glenn? It's going to be McCarthy? Of the other three, the highest odds, I think they're serious about Brady. And he would be one. I don't know if he's truly interested in the Saints job. It, he kind of found himself in a very similar situation as the OC in Carolina when he showed up there. Now and I will say this about Joe Brady, he seems to learn from his mistakes real quick because unlike some other coordinators, he corrected course real quick and kind of flew back up the ranks and is running Buffalo's offense now and running it very well. So does he kind of want to go through that similar thing he went through as Carolina now as a head coach instead of an OC? Or is he looking for, I'm going to use this as an example, or maybe at Jacksonville also, as Chicago and Jacksonville as examples of got a lot of stuff there that I already in place that I can work with and will address what else I need in those particular places. But I can maybe get the offense going first year, no longer than the second. Got some established playmakers, some possible quarterback situations in both of them that he may be willing to try to work with. Again, not a lot of ownership meddling, despite the fact that Balky's in Jackson. So I don't know if he's going to look at the opportunity from the Saints the same way as he would look at those two. And I got to have to kind of question that about the other two offensive coordinators, more or less the same way, especially Moore, who's looking at probably the Dallas job. And I think he is officially going to interview there. He was there as an OC once and worked with Dak. So logically, if you want to ask the two questions, that could just very well be a yes and yes. And so he may not really be an opportunity for us. So I found it interesting the way the odds are being in the rumors, the talk going around it. But setting odds and including a bunch of guys that we really haven't interviewed yet. And it's kind of out there with the interviews we've already had and kind of, I don't want to say public, but sort of well known the leanings of the Saints toward Aaron Glenn. And it seems like Aaron Glenn has some leanings towards the Saints, but how much compared to the New York report, who really knows? But ultimately, look, it's going to be a tough road to hoe in 2025 and probably 2026. So there's this fit, this do you want to be here and do we really want you to be here? Have any chance in this at all? Both parties have to be solid yeses on those two questions because any doubts, anything, you can't have that disconnect. In fact, we've had it for a while. It needs to be the connection of, I mean, it's blue in the face cliche, but everybody pulling in the same direction, figuring out what the plan is, go execute it, and find a way to freaking make it work. So I'm still gonna plant my flag on the Glenn in that category. We'll see about everybody else, and we'll see even if Mike McCarthy comes in for an interview at all, or if they even offer one to him. Yeah. Leave it on this caveat about young coaches maybe looking for certain things. We didn't even request an interview with Ben Johnson, and he is the guy as far as everybody seems to be concerned out there. And so, thinking one of those two questions answered that right away, and both sides didn't even seem to want to have a casual conversation about it. So, let's see what Northern's back in the fold, and Um, Mark Levy. I don't know. I hadn't thought about it at all. There's a name that never crossed my radar, and I'm not um, I'm not familiar enough with the coaching situations to go out and actively seek who they should hire. I'm more of the hear the possibilities types and going, okay, what do you, the two questions we're talking about? Do they really want to be here? Do you really want them here? Who we're kind of talking about? What makes sense in that aspect? Because I've said this before, and I'll say it again, and it keeps coming up, and everybody just gets so focused on like the X and O's and the game day stuff of a head coach, which clearly understand. I am not saying is not important. It's crucial. It absolutely is crucial. But there's so much crucial stuff that happens before that. That's going to start happening almost from the second you hire this guy that he's got to come in and do. That if none of that is done correctly and laid out correctly, including getting on the same page with the front office, X's and O's come Sundays are gonna be problematic without solving kind of the other stuff, and I think that's kind of their main jobs. So I don't know where Mark Levy would fit into all that, to be honest with you, or really too many of these other guys. But um, when you get names out there and confirmed interviews, you can kind of start looking at resume. You can kind of get the tone and the temperature of the club and the coach, and maybe I can formulate a little more of opinion on that at that point. Um, Lombardi rings or Lombardi trophy or Super Bowl rings? I'm assuming you're asking. And even the because if it's Super Bowl rings, as far as I know, the losing team still gets rings, and I've been there once, so he's got at least once. Um, he's won. See, this is the question. He was hired the exact same time as their GM, John Lynch. Can one do it without the other? Much like Holmes and Campbell both showed up at Detroit at the same time, and they're making their push right now. Can one do it without the other? So there is that question mark there, but for the most part, he's done nothing in Frisco that I look at and go, yeah, he doesn't know what he's doing. Kind of feel like he does. And one of the big things is, well, they're going to have to reset because they had a down year this year. Let's see what they come out, and that could be the telltale sign that they may never recover from this. They decline, and he's gone, or they could, and then you're going, yeah, it's a good coach because you get hung up on this whole you got to have a Super Bowl ring. If you don't have a Super Bowl ring, you're apparently not very good, which the only chance you can have to get a Super Bowl ring or win the Lombardi trophy is you have to be consistently good, not consistently average, mediocre, heading towards bad. So, yes, I would definitely hire Shanahan and give him the shot. Most important thing in the head coach is know what the crap they're doing. Period. End of story. It could be a young guy, it could be an older guy with experience. I don't know, don't care. Just show up and you can build the culture, you can set the tone, you can identify players and which right and which wrong with them, who can stay, who needs to go. And if you're going to run a front office where you have to convey to the front office what type of players you need and they have to go get them for you, well, you got to be able to do that. Got to be able to hire a staff that can implement the vision you are setting for them as they're working with the players. You need also everybody involved to be able to relate to the players so you don't have a disconnect there. So you give me a young guy and an experienced guy that can do all that stuff and build a strong team that year in, year out is in the mix. That's what I want. No, nothing ensures your success as a head coach. Nothing ensures anybody's success anywhere. Because if it did, think about it, Northern, then everybody would be 100% successful all the time. Doesn't happen in life, so much less football. Northern, if I'm gonna tell you right now, because I'm getting tired of this shit. If this is another, you've been sitting here putting all this crap in because you're still trying to get me to go, "Oh, I appreciate Mickey Loomis for 2009. It doesn't matter that he sucks now." I'm not going there. So this is going to be my response. You enjoy 2009. I'm going to live in the present. Yeah, we all learning and processing. And and I think the important part is learning, processing, and figuring it out and changing when you need to. Because believe me, I got to deal with a lot of that myself. So I think we all do. But yes, I will try my best to keep going. Um, yeah, Matt, given situation, Glenn or Brady over McCarthy, leaning towards Glenn. Like I said, one of the things I like, and this goes back, we had this conversation way back in 2020 when the whole Matt Rule slash Joe Brady disaster was brewing in Carolina till it, fell apart. And Brady was the first to go. He had to fall on a sword for Rule. But that his rise was kind of meteoric. I mean, he basically went from Sean Payton's intern with a lot of potential because there was a lot of people obviously in that building and went, guy's good, to being the passing game coordinator in 2019 national championship and really showing, hey, I showed up. I helped install in a completely new offense that turned that ship around 180. Well, that's stuff you really like about the guy, but didn't have a lot of experience that he took inexperience with him to Carolina, took his lumps there. And then, like I said earlier, shows back up in Buffalo as quarterbacks coach, and then eventually has moved to OC and kind of going, he may be going through the process of figuring out what went wrong or figuring out what I didn't know because I mean, it was a fast acceleration for him. So I don't really have a problem with Brady in that aspect. Just it's I just keep looking at him going, again, the two questions, do they really want me here? I think if the Saints really do want him here and he wants to be here, he could be that young guy that is going to learn from mistakes real quickly. I'm hoping because, as I said, that pattern seems to have emerged. And so when something's screwed up, to recognize, go, now we got to fix that right now. Little like Rizzy did when he came in. And look, we got the Rizzy bump, I think, because he realized some stuff that needed immediate change and did his best to do it. And it resonated with the team and moved it up a little bit. So to your point, I think Glenn would be very similar to that. Again, talking about system guys, McCarthy, that's the downside of that because then it's like less hesitant to change and recognize problems and make adjustments and just kind of went through that, just kind of keep plowing through and trying to make it work when it's not going to work. Kubiak, I just saw is having his second interview. So could Kubiak wait to see Glenn would keep the offensive staff in place? Um, I don't know. It seems like I didn't what his plan would be, but it seems like if he showed up here, maybe. Um, but Kubiak is Seattle's pulled him in for a second interview for their OC. And God, I'm drawing a blank on Seattle's new coach, ex-college coach. But apparently the time the time of the firing of the old OC was what I read was predicated on the fact that the OC that just got fired over there would not commit to running Walker and Charbonnet and building the offense around running those two guys. So if that's true, I can see and doing it in his own type scheme, obviously, because it's kind of what the colleges do now, and that's where he came from. So I could see Kubiak drawing a lot of interest from him, and if Mickey already said I can't guarantee any of the assistants' jobs, so they're not blocking him on a lateral move, and if he gets an offer, he gets an offer. So the problem is on this, if you want Glenn, like I said in the last video, you almost have to pull for Detroit to lose this week. So once they're out, the offers can be made. You can go, hey, did we lock him down? And at that point, then you figure out the offensive side of the staff. I've heard Ross Jackson, and I'm trying to think of anywhere else, but I feel like I did, where it's been kind of mentioned that the organization would like to keep more of that offensive staff in place, and I'm still grading them on an incomplete. I don't know if I have enough information to go, should we or should we not? But the new head coach, I'm sure, is going to have some one way or the other. And if it's a defensive guy, he may very well look at it and go, no, no, no. What they were doing was okay. And let's give it another year before we make any big changes there. Oh, imagine Coach Deion Sanders in Jerry's world. I probably would have to watch Dallas games every week and follow them. Yeah, that would be because, ooh, man. Um, and I'm still, I mean, I've kind of followed Dion coaching kind of from a distance, Colorado, and they had a really good year this year. So I don't know how good of a coach he is, but we know how much of a showman and a spokesman he is. And for better or worse, he knows how to lead men. I think he's proven that like he can just get out there and it's that motivational, in your face type guy. So I don't know. I don't even know if there's any truth to that rumor, but it's been put out there that Prime's coming in to be Dallas's new coach. But it would be interesting to see those two in press conferences together and on the podium together after a game or a practice or something. Just yeah, I'd agree. I think there really would be some must watch TV if Coach Prime gets hired in Dallas. My full time job right now is this. No, well, God dang it, the guy in Cincinnati was for the longest time, and it showed a lot like Dallas that Brown was his name, I think. But no, I think he's out, and I think they've gone the route. But I mean, to your point, the um, I don't think the Carolina's own Tepper. I think he learned a lesson um, in the last couple. We'll see, because I'm gonna tell you right now, if y'all ain't scared to death that Carolina's about ready to hurdle past us, then you ain't paying attention what went on in Carolina, especially at the end of the year. Well, that's another one you'll see next year because they still have a long way to go. But are they going to continue on this whole trend of we're going to have to figure out a way to develop young players and not throw them to the wolves like we did last year and give them a chance to? Everybody saw what Bryce Young did after his benching, came back, played out of his mind. That undrafted kid Coker really started to step up at the end of the year. There's got some more spattered around. They dealt with some injuries, kind of hung in there and gave Atlanta a what for in the last game of the year. So I don't know if it's going to hold, if it's going to carry over, but we saw similar things from Tampa Bay and Atlanta in the last few years, and they're light years ahead of us, it seems. So I'll hold on with the Carolina comment. I think Dallas, Jerry Jones would be a great owner if he would just get out of his own way. And I think that's one of the biggest problems they have, and he just can't seem to help it. And that's not only an ownership problem. There's GMs around the league. I'm thinking of one has the same problem. Um, again, the head coach is only going to be able to do so much, but he's got to set the foundation. And everybody else in the organization has got to, instead of whatever it is we've been doing, we need to all come together. Stop. There's just disconnects all over the place. You got to stop and fix them and move on. They and they got to bring talent in because we just simply don't have enough of it on the roster. The yeah, I don't know all the rules on that, and I know it's gonna hang out for a while, but um whatever the cat look, let's be honest, what really goes on. Agents talk to people, and people talk to people, and then people talk to somebody representing the club. And it's not a big giant secret. Did we not know everybody that we were hiring Kubiak off of Frisco staff? What, 2 weeks before they even played the Super Bowl? Just waiting around for the game to end so we could officially hire. So as far as the rigmarole of that, yeah, I know their rules, and I know every team that wants to get around them knows the ways to get around them, and nothing ever happens once they do. So when it's a firm deal like it was Kubiak while they were still in the playoffs last year, and you come out and hear the same thing about Glenn, and I don't know if anything's ever 100% until they obviously sign the dotted line and do the press conference and everything. But you're probably in the high 90s at that point. And we're still a ways away from that even happening. Um, I would think what you're going to see first, and you may see some guys hired, but maybe some guys withdrawing their names. That normally happens, and then you kind of start zeroing in on who has a real betting odds of who going where. I don't know what Trey Hendrickson was drafted as. I know he played defensive end while he was here, and he progressed. Seeing that one, just why you want to turn this rusty knife between my shoulder blades every time we have to talk about Hendrickson. But he played edge and progressively, I mean, he did what you wanted to do, progressively got better every year. And even though I know they didn't fully trust him, they played him enough that he led the team in sacks. You let him walk out the door, and then he just is what he is now. Um, so it's not so much what they were drafted as, and he gets hinky when you start to, especially now, the it's even more muddled between college and pros. What's off the ball, what's edge, what's in the box, and then designated them with what they are: defensive end, linebacker, slot corner, um, nickel Sam, all these designations they throw on these guys to try to figure it out, when all they are is a bunch of hybrid players that can do an awful lot of things for you. So where you put them on the field, lining up outside the offensive tackle and predominantly rushing the passer, he's an edge guy and he's getting sacks. That's ultimately what Hendrickson turned into. And man, he should still be in the building. He was a guy you developed a lot like Granderson. I mean, they weren't high draft picks, and it'd be nice to have those two guys playing next to each other in the production. I don't know if anybody saw this. Speaking of our edge players, but somebody threw up the number that Houston, who's in the playoffs right now with Will Anderson, and used to play at LSU, Daniil Hunter, threw up the number of total pressures they have as a starting edge players. Threw up Granderson and Youngs, who were close. They were within like 10 or 20. It was like 140 something to like 130 something or 20 something. But this total sacks, they like tripled the sacks. And that's the kind of thing that when you're looking at this team going, well, if you'd have had it, Hendrickson thrown up numbers like he's been thrown up in Cincinnati, could he have done it here? Or was that Cincinnati's doing something different with a guy who showed while he was here he was getting better to play that edge. And then we just totally missed it. We still believed in Marcus Davenport and kept drafting edge players after that, and nothing's really worked out. That's the disconnect I'm talking about because he shows up somewhere else. If he'd have been here developing with Granderson on the other side, especially when you had a good veteran leader like Cam also on the edge, going, could you be sitting with a very similar situation that Houston's sitting at with two guys with that much pressure rate, but that much sacks to go with it, where we can generate the pressure, can't get quarterback on the ground? I don't know, man. The biggest when Hendrickson, the what ifs that just roll off of him, and if Zach Bowen turns in to be another Hendrickson, he did it in only 1 year, but man, what a hell of a year. But he starts doing that again, and we roll back the same conversation with him. That's where the knife gets turned, man. Look, you got to figure this out. And even when you draft the right guys, figure out how to develop them and use them right. Keep them in the building so they can do here what they are now doing in their new homes. I think mostly what's going to happen with Carr is more about a money issue than anything else. Unfortunately, or not unfortunately, I don't know, but we'll see. That seems to be a non-starter. Nobody's really talking about it. And the only shots fired was Carr wasn't taking a pay cut. So I don't know if they're talking behind or the Saints are just leaving it that and waiting to see what happens because until head coaches are figured out and I'm trying to think about what point you'd be in the draft process. Senior Bowl? I don't know, but I don't think you'll be quite at the combine. I think all the head coaching jobs should be filled before that. But somewhere in there, I think final decisions are going to not only on Carr, but some of the other quarterbacks or top players around the league that we're kind of waiting and holding our breath on may know a lot more at that point. And I do think that could dictate, like, not just necessarily Glenn, but a head coach coming in the interview or our current staff, a term of a term of hiring that may be in contention between the two, where one side sees, I'm not even going to guess, but just saying, one of them looks at the Derek Carr situation this way, the other one looks at the Derek Carr situation this way and going, can they work it out? Or is that the stumbling block where you start losing guys off your list? Either the Saints don't want them because they won't play ball or they don't want to be here because they don't agree with how the Saints are going to handle that. So I think the Derek Carr situation could come in as leverage some kind of way on either side. Yes, I remember Rob Ninkovich. That's the one Sean Payton yelled on the sideline after the 15-yard personal foul penalty. Yeah, number 99, you think you're worth 15 yards? Yeah, he went to New England. And I think we got rid of him because he and Sean that was one of Sean's make examples out of guys who weren't doing what Sean wanted them to do. But the difference was we replaced Ninkovich with some pretty decent defensive ends along the years. Yeah, understanding cap issues. I agree. The roster, you've got to use the draft to fix your roster. And if once you have it fixed, you've got to keep your roster relevant through the draft. It's no surprise, and I know we've talked about it since the great draft of really 2017. And you look at some subsequent drafts we had, it's kind of like, you may look at some and go, man, just not good at all. And some of them you go, well, we had a couple guys that we found. But the propensity, I think the real problem is we just keep getting reminded. We keep missing on like ones and twos. And those are the guys that you're bringing in that you're thinking going to have it may not be right away, but a pretty quick impact that you're hoping. And you miss on some, but we've been missing on pretty much all of them lately. And it just accumulates to part of the problem that you're talking about. Yeah, and I think every other team, like you said, Mike, every other team, they have to do the same thing and they run through the same same problems, and the teams that consistently draft better, obviously build a better roster and are equipped to handle stuff better. And some teams, I think they, look at Frisco. They made that the whole disaster with the Trey Lance pick, and we've seen other teams just fall apart missing on a first round quarterback like that. They more than made up for it in other places in their draft. Not only getting Brock Purdy, but you look around some of the mainstays of their roster, not necessarily starters, but guys that really contribute game in, game out. They found some other guys to fill some holes and go, well, we got to start the Mr. Relevant rookie, but we've got other pieces that we've been able to draft, weren't top guys that are still floating around here and still helping us win. And the Saints used to be great at that, and they have to get back at doing that too. Probably. But he was starting. Well, he wasn't starting. He was playing a whole lot on that edge side. The thing they were using primarily as a rusher, and I think that was their big bugaboo about him. They didn't think he could play the run. But he was by far, out of anybody not named Cam Jordan in that group, the better edge player opposite of Cam. Because Rankins, that was back in the days when we used to line Rankins up on that edge spot because they used to go that heavy front thing that they used to do back in those days. And many a times you were looking at Rankins sitting there on the right edge. It's actually warming up out there, but in my house it kind of got cold because I cranked. I basically just turned the heat down, knowing we were getting a warm up. House is a little late catching up because we did have a temperature drop last night, but I think that's the last one until we get a fair dose of what y'all been getting in a couple of days as far as the cold frigid weather. Glenn, do you think he'll bring players and coaches with him? That's an interesting one. I don't know. I'm sure he will. As far as, well, I'm sure some coaches he'll want whether it's guys he's currently with Detroit or guys he's worked with in the past. I think all coaches kind of, they may not get their dream team of assistants, but I think they'll grab a few guys to bring with them, and understandably, I mean, you get that part of it, and then he may have to look around for the rest to build his staff. I probably any coach is pretty much in that boat, I would think. Um, but I don't know his staff in Detroit that well. Who's there? Because he's the OC moving the head coach, and again, this just isn't the Saints hired somebody. It's typically how it works. Well, that coordinator comes in because it's easy to bring the guys that you're giving a promotion to and has somebody on his staff. Oh, he could take my job as a coordinator and move him up. And sometimes you have these, you'll have like a position coach, say, offensive line coach, and you'll have an assistant offensive line coach, and you go, oh yeah, I like that. He's learning under the other guy. I think he's ready for the job. Hire and promote him. So they kind of how you do that. So I would think somewhere, whether they're in Detroit or, like I said, somebody's worked with previously, somewhere where he can give them the promotion that he wants, the route it goes. So I'm assuming, yeah, there'll be some of that. The Aints network, well, right now we're the Aints. We're 5-12 team, so I guess so. I don't know Anzalone's contract status, and right now, I don't know if we'll be able to afford him. I don't know if he hits free agency, if he would happen to be a free agency. For all I know, Detroit wants to bring him back. So he's got to become available first. And then, depending on what we do, there's a chance that he'll have to play for a league minimum for a couple of years with no signing bonus for us to be able to get him on the roster. So we'll see. Yeah, it is kind of the island of misfit toys right now. Older veterans, and then, the whole, to what we were talking about earlier in the group chat, whoever was throwing out there the $113 million of cap hit with X number of players over the age of 32. And it's like, yeah, we've been doing that for years, been part of the problem. Um, so to move around that, yeah, you start looking at our roster and look, T-Bob and Hester were talking about it the other morning, and they were like, the bottom end of our roster right now, there's like, they're marginal NFL players on like a practice squad. And, you know, yeah, 61 players on the roster, but they were ballparking it around. And so I'll take their opinion on it, being a couple of ex college and one ex pro football player going, it's like 20 more of those guys. They're like, should be on a practice squad, really. And there's a chance they're going to make the 53 as it stands right now of this team and have to go out there and play. So, head coach coming in's got some stuff to deal with. Not only that, I think, you're talking about unfair to being the coach and staff, but hey, maybe they can tune it together and get it to work, you know, and through the draft, or you find a little money to be able to sign somebody that can make a difference. I don't know, but it's asking a lot. It really is, especially in 2025. That's why I'm still just sitting here looking at it going, best case scenario to me is still 2026. I don't know their contract status. Because again, that's going to play into it. We can't take on more money. I don't know if Detroit can. I have no idea what their situation is. Um, I don't know if you necessarily want um to make that move right now. Or all right, let me rephrase that. The possibility of that move happen would depend on what the what the head coach looks like, first of all, because it could be who knows, could be a Kingsbury or Moore or Brady or somebody, and they would definitely have a weigh in on that. But if it's somebody like Glenn on that side, and I'm sure he's going to have an opinion, but he's still got to put the offensive staff in. And if the club, the organization, is willing to work with him on trying to move Carr in a trade or whatever, there's going to be parameters around that based on the contracts involved of who you're trading and who you're trading for, with severe limitations on what you can and can't do. Um, so I mean, I guess there's a chance if it all works out. And be honest with you, I don't know if we're looking for it. And I think I can't swear to this, but I thought I read somewhere that Carr has a no trade clause in his contract. Anybody has his contract, Henry wants to double fact check me on that. Well, I'm not sure, but I thought I heard that the other day. Somebody said that. So I am not reporting it as fact. I'm think I heard it, but if I heard it correctly and it is true, then there's a whole nother level that you've got to throw in here on that. Um, Goff just kind of like I was never overly impressed with Goff, but I didn't think he was bad either. I thought it was a bad signal when basically the team that drafted him just gave up on him and traded the whole farm for Stafford, who I was like, I don't know how good he is. Well, come to find out, Les Snead was correct. But then you kind of see Goff under Ben Johnson just kind of growing into it and surrounded by a lot of weapons like he had with the Rams. So um I, I don't know about ability wise that I don't think he's anywhere close to the caliber of a Drew Brees or anybody else who's in that conversation. But I think he's just one of those guys that um in the right situation, he's solid, and you can win games with him. Detroit's proven that. The Rams proved that also with when he was their starter there. You're gonna win it all with him. Well, we'll got close with the Rams, but getting another shot with Detroit. So So I'm not sure what you mean by the antithesis of Drew Brees, but yeah, he's definitely not Drew Brees in the overall scheme of things. Um, have McCoy, Ruiz, Fuag, and Penning. We shall protect. We'll be better at it with all four of them. Oddly enough, I can tell you about this one. How much of a difference McCoy makes, and was McGovern was the center we picked up off the Jets practice squad, and when McCoy came back, we didn't protect him, and he wound up back over there. I was going through one day last week or the week before, kind of the PFF grades on our offensive linemen, and you start seeing these weird. And Fuaga, especially, a lot of the great when the season ended, and they kind of were grading the rookies. Talked about these yo-yo upswings with him. So I was looking at their grades, and there was a lot of that with all of them. And then you're looking, and when you go by the game by game breakdown, almost all of them were better with McCoy and then McGovern at center than they were at the guards. We were trying to play at center to fill in. Just throwing it out there while we're fixing the roster, I'm once again going to pound the table. Can we please find a backup center who is a center that, if we get in a crunch, is going to play guard instead of hoping McCoy is going to play 68 quarters of football in 2025? So we won't have to worry about a primary backup at center, because I think it makes a difference to have a true center running with the twos in case something happens to McCoy. So I hope they rethink this. I don't know what you can and can't do in that scenario, but I hope they at least consider it and address it. And if not, kind of go back to the way you guys were grading out when you had the centers, as opposed to trying to fill in with one of your guards, which is basically what they were doing with Lemieux and when Patrick played and all that. So, um, but I think it's better. You get all of them on there. I think you've got something to work there. How much better? I don't know. First of all, I got to make sure everybody interviews and nobody backs out. But I would say off that list, crap. That's where I get torn. I'd be probably more in the feeling of a full rebuild mode at that point. Probably going on the offensive side. I probably just throw it to the wind and go, let's see if Joe Brady will work. Because McCarthy makes the most sense. I just here in the pit of my gut, I'm going, I just don't know if that's the right move at that point. No, the Rams included more than that. That was a hellacious package they sent and a big draw. Um, that the Brad Holmes used to pull in talent through the draft. That's still all over that Detroit roster. Um, they need to get better, obviously. But they did, even when they weren't playing well, they still kind of exceeded my expectations of what I thought we were going to get. Outside of the first two games where just everything was phenomenally, insanely good. But even when all the problems started happening, um, I I thought it was going to be worse than what it was, and it so I again an incomplete grade, but I feel like you got a lot to work there with. The real issue is when you kind of trying to figure it out. Well, did we really make the right call moving Flog to the left side? We would have been better off leaving him at the right side. Do we go look for a left tackle? Do we try to move Penning back? Or do you just try to ride it out where everybody was at and go get a left guard, try to fill in the hole there, and pray you can keep McCoy healthy all year? So, and I'm still banging the table, get a legitimate center backup for McCoy to run with the twos that hopefully you can get to some type of semblance of what you got with McGovern, where at least everybody around you is going to play better than they did with the converted guard. So I can't disagree that there's potential there. Um, How much? I don't know. To be better, yeah, I think you could get that group better. They can't regress though. You can't have a regression there because that would be problematic. I probably not. Um, that's just one of those things that's like it's sort of like when Vince Lombardi left the Packers and went wherever he went. It's not the same to me. Um, could he win here? Possibly. Uh, is he a good coach? Yeah, obviously. It's, if you look what he's done in Pittsburgh, but when you're talking about fit and pity your stomach, I mean, just looking at him on the sidelines the whole time, I would be thinking, it's the equivalent of Jeff Bridges trying to play Rooster Cockburn instead of John Wayne. It's just keep looking at it, going, "That's not right. That's not right. That's not right." So it's kind of hard to me to picture that happening. But the reality of, yeah, I mean, if they wound up here, he's a good coach. What could he do? He probably better than the previous guy. I feel pretty sure about that. Oh, that's your continuation. So Trevor would improve like he did and not giving up on Saldivari. Uh, he he really and truly hasn't played very much in 2 years. So it's like saying I'm not giving up on, you know, Kendre Miller. Um, 2 years riddled with injuries, and you kind of sitting back and going, at what point do we keep going in this direction, or do we have to consider something else? I don't know. Um, but what you absolutely have to avoid is, and this last time I'm saying his name because I swear to God, if I say it a third time, he might Beetlejuice us and show up on our roster. But it's like the Marcus Davenport injury problem. It's all ability in the world, but you have to have the ability to stay on the field and help us. So, and it's not a very struggle to check that box. And I don't know what he really showed the limited amount of playing time he got this year before he got hurt again. So, well, we technically didn't have backup centers. We had backup guards we were putting at center. So, yes, all problematic stuff. But even before the ball was snapped, I have a feeling there was probably some random communication problems going on up there. Um, all that stuff that centers do. And remember, before the season, Kubiak took the blocking adjustments and all at the line away from Carr and made it the center's job. And you only had one full-time center. That was your starter. So everybody else is kind of playing guard or something and then having to move over. And that's my point. It's like a lot of that, not only the mechanical and the fundamental stuff that you had problems there because, and it's not their fault. There were more guards than centers, but it comes around to becoming a problem later on. And you can see, I mean, it's physical evidence as far as PFF's concerned, whatever you think about them, that they have it consisted of when the Patricks and the Lemieux have to start coming in and playing center, the overall play just kind of suffered on that line. So yeah, that's just it doesn't really matter. It's just like both teams got it, but that was a win for both teams because the Rams won their Super Bowl and Detroit restocked a flailing franchise and number one seed right now. Utah Williams. I don't even know who Utah Williams is. Um, well, tell me who the new DC and is and what scheme they're going to run because apparently that's a big part of it. Why some of those guys were no longer here because to hear it be told the other day, they didn't really fit the scheme. We're going to get playing time off of pure ability and age right now. Uh, Probably Zach Bond because he's by far. I still don't know who Utah Williams is, but younger and if if you watch what he's doing in Philly, it's making plays all over the field. So kind of hard to go, Jesus, I wish he was still here. I can give a good look at CJ Gardner Johnson. I just he's another impact type player and when he's healthy. So probably one of those two. Hendrickson, you're at the point now that 31, 32. Like if I was would be more happy that much like Cam Jordan did, he was here the whole time and never left. But like to bring him back now is the question mark is how much longer has he got type thing. But no, I'm almost out. When I run out, that's probably going to be the end of the show. But nothing right now other than the fact that I'm getting all kind. I'm assuming you're talking about the online shop. Um, that just shipping right now is a nightmare. So I'm kind of stepping back from that a little bit. Went through some issues with that. It'll straighten out. It's weather related, plus what's going on in California. And all it's kind of got just a bunch of stuff weirdly, especially in what's going on there in print demand on demand because of that those situations. Some vendors right now they can't even operate because they can print it, but they can't get it out of their location right now for various reasons, or it's just going to show up extremely slow. So hopefully get a notice from them going, okay, we've got everybody back online. They're able to do whatever they do. And at that point, yes, I will drop some type of promotion. Marvin Williams. Oh, I don't think his first name was Marvin, but whatever. Yeah. Marcus Williams. No. Um, Injury issues has slowed way down. He's really a single high safety in man. That's what he did other than the tackle of all tackles that he missed. But, excluding that, he's a single high safety while you're playing a lot of man underneath that could just cover back there. I don't really know how Baltimore used him early on, but I do know that basically Hamilton, their rookie from 2 years ago, I think it was the same year that Hendrickson was drafted by Detroit, kind of taken over that role when they go man. But I still think they play an awful lot of zone. I don't think Williams was ever really that good in like a zone, especially too high safety look. So, or not nearly as he was in the single high. So, yeah, he wouldn't be on my list to bring back. Plus, I think he got hurt again in IR again this year. That's been happening a lot to him. Point on injuries, keep playing younger players and take our lumps. We'll try to build in a new core. Um, love Honey Badger be giving snaps to young guys at the end of the year. Yeah, I think, and I think there were some missed opportunities there. I get it. You didn't just want to start pulling pads off the veterans, because we talked about that. You couldn't send that message while everything was up in turmoil. I think it was good that they, in a weird sort of way, they were still trying to actively win games. But I always thought there was a way you could, in a Tampa Bay game, I did see a lot of the young players out there, but was what it was at that point. Game was basically over. Um, but could have found some time to sneak some of those guys on there. And I really, you know, y- Groupie's an interesting one, right? He had a really good year this year, kicking, but it was brought up that, and you've re-signed Charlie Smith with the 2-year deal or whatever, but not giving him an opportunity one time coming down the stretch to just be the kicker, right? Going, let's find out. Let's, you know, it sounded like they didn't even consider it because Rizzi was asked in one of the last press conferences, and I think they doubled down and tried to follow up after he said no. He was like, no, Groupie's our kicker for the rest of the year or whatever. So, um, I'd have liked to seen at least that more safeties playing. Would you point to Honey Badger? Now, I think some of them did, but And if they played a lot and we didn't notice, then that probably says a whole bunch about it too. But no, just most of my I don't look good and I look better in black. It's most of my Saint stuff is black or like the green hoodie. Eh, or he just could have tackled him after he caught the ball. And then we go from there. But when you miss a tackle and he runs for touchdown to end the game, yeah. No, they're one's sleeping over there. I don't know where the other one's at, but thank you for asking. No, they're just I d- it was their dinner time right before I came on, so fed them and they do what they do after they sleep for about an hour, hour and a half. Nothing went down to Mickey and me other than the fact that he's an arrogant ass that refuses he admits mistakes and he's screwing this team up over the last 4 years. It's nothing personal. It's just business. He fixes all that, and if he fixes that this year, I'll be screaming his praises. He's got the organization going the wrong way right now, so there's no getting around it. Probably the last I'm going to be talking about Mickey for a while. Probably not, though. Who we kidding? But we'll see. Um, and it's on that one. Yes, I am almost completely out of coffee and ready for a refill. Thank you for joining today. Kind of went down the long walk on that in the question and answers, but kind of just keep curving it back to the head coaching candidates. My impression, just a feeling, the way everybody's talking. Don't read too much in this whole thing of Glenn first choice being the Jets. That may not be accurate or total BS is kind of what it seems. And I do believe that both sides, the questions on the sidebar right there, the two, that's solid yeses. I don't know how many yeses are solid yeses to those two questions once you start moving down. And I think that's a problem because if you're going to try to do what you're trying to do, whether you're going to rebuild or, God forbid, try another one of these resets, whoever you hire to bring in, the conclusion and the takeaway is nothing more than this. They better be fully committed to the organization, and the organization better be fully committed to him. And they better start pulling in the right direction and start showing the signs that we're not going to have another repeat of the last couple of years. That's what it boils down to. I feel more comfortable about Glenn. But, like I said earlier, we really haven't interviewed any of the offensive guys. They may gain some traction. And when you start taking the temperature, somebody on that side could get a little hot and you go, well, maybe I see it. So thank you for joining today. First time here. Please go ahead and hit a subscribe for me. Give me a thumbs up if you wouldn't mind. I'd appreciate it. And I know we'll probably keep coming on the comments, but I think I think head coaching, Northern will probably be happy for me to say this because he's really been wanting to focus more on that. But I think that's truly where the focus is. The other issues, keep your eye on the draft and what's coming up because it's a big pick at 9, and that'll be topics we're going to be coming up with. And everybody's hamstrung with the cap until they figure out the cap and what they're going to do and who they're going to do it with. So right now, that's where we're all bundled up. That's where we'll be heading. But I think most of this is going to be keeping an eye on the coaching carousel as it was and see where we're going. So I expect that to be when I'm back on Sunday night, probably the topic of conversation. But who the hell knows what the hell will happen between now and then, and it could totally fly off the rail, and it'll be something other than who knows. So till I see you Sunday night live streaming, be about 8 o'clock Central. But until I see you then, I'm Tim. Peace out and who dat.